This story is inspired by real events shared anonymously by hospital staff across Arizona. What you're about to hear isn't fiction, it's a warning. It started with a flicker on the monitor. Just a flicker. But when I rewound the footage, what I saw chilled me deeper than anything I'd ever witnessed in my years as a night nurse. My name is Claire Dalton, and I work the graveyard shift at Phoenix Children's Hospital. For those who aren't familiar, it's a sprawling campus of fluorescent-lit halls, beeping monitors, and sterile silence that feels heavier after midnight. While most people fear the cries of children, I've learned to fear the moments when it gets too quiet. That eerie stillness always comes before something unexplainable. I've worked in pediatric intensive care for 6 years and night shift for 3. At first, I chose it for the peace. Fewer parents, less chaos. But that tranquility quickly gave way to strange incidents. Odd behavior from patients, staff reporting voices from empty rooms, and the way certain lights never stayed off even when the power was secure. I ignored it all, laughed it off with the others, until room 509 reopened. Room 509 had been sealed for months. We weren't told why, only that renovations were underway. But there was never any construction crew, no sound of work, no maintenance logs. Just a quiet room at the end of the west hallway. Always locked, always dark. Then, 2 weeks ago, it opened again. A child was moved in. A terminal leukemia case named Amelia Burke. Sweet girl. Couldn't have been older than 9. Her chart was complicated, filled with references to prior incidents, psychiatric evaluations, and multiple hospitals. But what stood out wasn't on paper. It was in her eyes, haunted, distant. She didn't speak, not even when you tried to comfort her. Her silence was worse than any scream. My second night with Amelia was when things began unraveling. It was around 3:17 a.m., the dead hour. I was reviewing vitals at the nurse's station when the security monitor blinked. One of the hallway feeds, the one just outside 509, glitched with static, then briefly showed something. At first, I thought it was just interference, but I froze when I rewound the tape. The footage clearly showed a tall, hunched figure standing just outside 509's door. No face, no clothing I could recognize, just a dark silhouette with impossibly long arms and a bent posture. It remained still for several seconds before disappearing without walking away. Just gone. I called security. They brushed it off. Old wiring. Happens all the time, they said. But when I went to check the door in person, the hallway was cold. Not like AC cold, unnatural. The kind that sinks into your spine and makes your breath fog, even when the thermostat says 70. I went into room 509. Amelia was sitting up in bed, staring at the security camera in her room. Her eyes, those gray, sunken eyes, were wide open, locked on the blinking red light above the door. Amelia, I asked softly, "Everything okay?" She slowly turned to face me and whispered the first words I'd ever heard from her. "He watches from the black part." I didn't know what that meant, and I tried to ask, but she lay back down and pulled the blanket over her head, refusing to say another word. Later that shift, I tried to bring it up with the attending physician, Dr. Lawrence, but he waved me off, saying Amelia had a long history of hallucinatory trauma and not to indulge it. When I asked about the room's history, he got quiet. She was placed there because it's isolated, he finally said. Some of the other patients were disturbed by her, and frankly, we need to keep her away from the oncology wing. She talks about death too much. I didn't respond, but my skin crawled when he said it. By the end of that week, The camera glitches had spread. Every hallway camera on the West Wing, particularly near room 509, began showing brief flashes of that same hunched figure, always standing still, always near child's room, and always vanishing before the next frame. The hospital's IT team ran diagnostics. Interference, they said. Old circuits. Nothing more. But they couldn't explain why it only happened in the West Wing. Then, 2 nights ago, I saw something I can never unsee. It was 2:43 a.m. I was doing my usual rounds and checking monitors. Amelia's vitals were erratic, pulse rapid, oxygen dropping. I rushed to her room, expecting to find her in distress. But when I opened the door, the room was empty. No Amelia. The bed was still warm. For bag dripping. Heart monitor beeping erratically. But the girl was gone. Panic shot through me. I called a code. Nurses and security flooded the floor. We locked down all exits. But no one found her. Not in the bathrooms. Not in the halls. Not in the stairwells. Nowhere. Then I remember the cameras. I sprinted back to the nurse's station and pulled up the feed. My hands trembled as I rewound the tape for room 509. The footage showed Amelia sitting upright in bed, staring at the camera again. Then, at exactly 2 hours, 41 minutes and 9 seconds, the feed cut to black. A second later, the screen lit up again, but the bed was empty, just like in real life. Except, there was someone else in the room. A tall shadow. Not a man. Not a nurse. Just darkness. Shaped like a person, but without detail or clarity. Standing at the foot of Amelia's bed. Its head tilted unnaturally to the side, as if examining her. Then, it raised an arm and pointed at the camera. At me. And the feed cut out. I replayed the footage at least 20 times, hoping it was an error. Hoping I'd hallucinated the whole thing from sleep deprivation. But each time, the result was the same. Amelia disappeared. The shadow pointed. The feed died. Security reviewed it too. But when they pulled the server logs, the footage was missing. Gone. No backup. Just static where the video should have been. I couldn't sleep when I went home that morning. I couldn't think. Couldn't shake the image of that thing pointing directly at the lens. At me. That night, I wasn't scheduled, but I came in anyway. I had no more. I had to see the original files before they were erased again. I waited until most of the staff were off the floor, then slipped into the basement archive room, where hard drives of all camera feeds were kept before being uploaded to the cloud. I found a one labeled for July 9th, the night Amelia vanished. There was no file, nothing, except a handwritten sticky note taped to the drive. Do not review footage. Dr. Lawrence. My hands clenched. My breath caught in my throat. Why would a physician restrict camera footage? I took the drive anyway. When I returned upstairs, I found a message blinking on the nurse's station computer. New patient. Room 509. Arrival. 3 a.m. The name field was blank. I rushed to the west hallway. Room 509's door was shut again. No light inside. But something had changed. The air was colder than before, and the hallway lights flickered violently as I approached. My badge wouldn't unlock the door. From behind it, I heard a sound. Not crying. Laughing. Soft, wet and broken. A child's voice, giggling. And beneath that, something else. A second voice. Deeper. Guttural. It whispered my name. Claire. My knees nearly buckled. I turned and ran back to the main station. Everything inside me screamed to leave the hospital and never return. But I had to know. Had to get answers before someone else was taken. Before something else came through. The door to room 509 hadn't opened in over a day. But I heard laughing, a child's laugh, and something else, a voice whispering my name from the other side. That's when I realized I wasn't dealing with a medical mystery. I was dealing with something evil. I didn't sleep, not even after I left the hospital that morning. My mind spun in chaotic circles, images flashing over and over. The hunched figure, the erased footage, the voice that whispered from behind that locked door. Claire. By noon, I was combing through old forums and medical blogs, desperate to find anything. Any staff stories, patient records, even rumors about Phoenix Children's Hospital, Room 509, or cases like Amelia's. Most of what I found was sanitized corporate PR or the usual ghost hunter nonsense. But then, buried deep in a forgotten subreddit for former medical workers, I found a post titled, "Don't Work Nights in the West Wing." The post was 3 years old, written by someone claiming to be an orderly. No name, no profile photo. Just this: they won't tell you about the West Wing, especially 509. But I saw it. A little girl vanished mid-shift, same as your story. Security footage corrupted. Staff transferred or resigned. No one ever talks. But I know what I saw. It took her. That room is a hole, a tear in something we shouldn't touch. If you're reading this, get out, before it learns your name. My blood ran cold. It wasn't just me. It wasn't just Amelia. That night, I went back early, arrived at 8:45, even though my shift didn't start until 11. I needed answers, and I knew who might have them. Dr. Lawrence. He was in his office, reviewing charts. When I knocked, he looked up with tired eyes that didn't match his young face. He was only in his mid-40s, but he looked exhausted, like he'd aged 20 years in 2 weeks. "I'm not on your shift tonight, Claire," he said flatly. "I need to talk to you about Amelia," I said, stepping inside before he could say no. In room 509. His expression didn't change, but I saw his jaw tighten. "She's gone," he muttered. "There's nothing to talk about. She didn't just leave, doctor. She disappeared, and something was in that room. I saw it on the footage. You erased it." He stood slowly and closed the door behind me. "I didn't erase anything. That footage deletes itself." I blinked. "Excuse me." He sat back down and folded his hands. "Room 509 has been isolated on and off for the last decade. There's a pattern. Every few years, a child goes missing, sometimes during a shift change, sometimes in the middle of the night, sometimes," he paused, voice tightening, "on camera. But no one believes us. Every time we report it, the files go missing. The cameras malfunction. People get fired. Or worse." I took a slow breath, heart pounding. "Worse how?" He looked me dead in the eyes. "They vanished too." Silence. He reached into a locked drawer and pulled out a slim, unmarked folder. Inside were printed photos, low-resolution screenshots from old video feeds. I recognized the west hallway instantly. But in each photo, standing near the door to room 509, was that same figure. Hunched, twisted, its limbs always distorted, and its presence always wrong. "These are from 2017, 2012, and one from 2005, he said. "We called it the Hollow Man. Not officially, of course, but that's what the nurses used to whisper in the break room. We thought it was some kind of hallucination, until staff started disappearing too." He hesitated, then added, "One of them was my sister." That knocked the breath from my lungs. She worked here. She was a pediatric therapist. Disappeared on Halloween night in 2012 after meeting with a patient in 509. There was never a trace. I sat in silence for a long time, staring at the folder. What is it? I finally whispered. I don't know, he said, but I believe it attaches to pain. Specifically, children's pain. This hospital was built over the ruins of a sanitarium for abandoned youth back in the early 1900s. Lots of history, lots of unmarked deaths. No one talks about it, but the West Wing sits directly over the old trauma ward. It's almost like something feeds on what happens here. I left his office, shaken to my core. Back at the nurse's station, I found a new patient intake form for room 509. This one had a name, Lily Arnett, age 7. Transferred from St. Joseph's after complications with trauma-related seizures. I recognized the name. Lily had been in our system before. She was born with a neurological condition, had frequent hospitalizations, and her mother had once filed a claim about something watching Lily at night. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Why bring another traumatized child into that room? Why keep using 509 at all? I walked to the security office, determined to pull a live feed before anything went wrong again. Greg, the graveyard officer, was asleep in his chair. I slipped past him and pulled up the hallway cams. 509 was dim. The new girl, Lily, was visible through the window. She was sitting on the edge of her bed, legs dangling, staring at the corner of the room. Her lips were moving, talking to someone, but there was no one there. I turned on the room feed. The audio crackled, and I had to adjust the dials. Then, finally, her voice came through. He says you're next. He says your name now. I yanked the headphones off. My heart was racing. That voice, the way she said it, wasn't her own. It was deeper, layered wrong. I had heard it once before, behind the door when Amelia vanished. I stared at the screen as Lily tilted her head sharply and turned her eyes directly toward the camera. Toward me. She raised her hand and pointed. The room lights flickered, and then she smiled. Not a child's smile, an ancient one. I ran to the elevator. The floor shook beneath my feet as the hallway lights began flickering violently. Code gray alarms blared over the intercom, followed by a system error message that I'd never heard before. Unauthorized activity detected in room 509. Security override failure. Contact administrator immediately. As I reached the hallway, I saw a nurse, Jamie, slumped against the wall just outside the door to 509. Blood trickled from her nose, and her eyes were wide open, staring at something that wasn't there. I grabbed her. Jamie, what happened? She mumbled incoherently. The black part, it came out, it touched me. Suddenly, from inside 509, I heard Lily's voice screaming. No, chanting. Her voice rose in pitch, then dropped again, weaving in and out languages I didn't recognize. Then silence. Total, absolute silence. I kicked the door in. The lights inside were off, but not dark. The room was bathed in a red glow, faint, pulsing, coming from the window monitor. All readings flatlined. Heart rate, 0. Oxygen, 0. EEG null. Lily was levitating 6 inches off the mattress. Around her, shadows danced, not cast from light, but moving of their own accord, twitching and jerking like puppets on broken strings. Her mouth hung open, and her eyes were pure white. On the wall behind her, words had been scrawled in what looked like blood. The ones who know must be taken first. Before I could move, something passed behind me. I turned too fast and caught only a glimpse. Black limbs, bent backwards, a neck twisting in unnatural angles. Eyes like smoke, burning into mine. The Hollow Man. I froze, and then it lunged. But just as its clawed hand reached for me, the lights surged. An alarm blared, and it vanished like smoke sucked into a vacuum. Lily fell to the bed, unconscious. I collapsed beside her, sobbing. That night changed everything. The footage, of course, was gone by morning. Greg said the entire security system rebooted. Jamie was placed on medical leave for seizure-induced psychosis. Dr. Lawrence refused to answer any further questions. Lily was moved out of the hospital within hours. Special facility, they said. But I knew. I know what I saw. And the last time I checked the intake list, there's another child scheduled for room 509 tomorrow night. I made a choice then. I couldn't keep ignoring it. Couldn't keep watching them send children into the mouth of something they refused to understand. If the Hollow Man wanted me next, then so be it. But I was going to fight. When I kicked in the door to room 509 and saw Lily levitating, surrounded by shadows that twisted like they had minds of their own, I realized one terrifying truth. This isn't just a haunting. It's a ritual, and it's not over. I didn't go home that morning. I couldn't. After everything I'd witnessed, Lily's unnatural trance, Jamie's vacant stare, the Hollow Man's grasp nearly closing around my throat, I knew going home would only give it a chance to follow. Or worse, infect the people I love. So I stayed in the hospital chapel, sitting alone in the farthest pew beneath a flickering electric candle and a stained glass arch of Saint Michael holding his sword against the serpent. The strange thing was, the chapel felt untouched. The moment I entered, the pressure in my chest lifted, the chill in my bones gone. It was like the only part of the hospital that he couldn't reach. I clung to that idea, couldn't, meaning there were limits, meaning he could be stopped. Around 9 a.m., after everyone had gone home or been rotated out, I tracked down an old friend who still worked in records, Eva Sandoval. We did our nursing residency together, but while I stayed in pediatrics, she shifted into administration and deep archives. She was skeptical when I told her what I needed, but she owed me a favor. When I told her I was looking for the original floor plans, personnel incidents, and unreported deaths linked to room 509, she blinked slowly. "You sure you want to dig there, Claire?" "No," I said honestly, "but I don't think I have a choice anymore." She sighed, slipped her badge across the scanner, and led me through a door marked records, level 3 clearance only. There were hundreds of paper files and microfilm records stored in that sub-basement vault, archive that hadn't been digitized because of inconsistencies. In hospital speak, that usually meant lawsuits, cover-ups, or anything that might spook investors. It took us 4 hours, but eventually we found a map, the original blueprint of the Phoenix Children's Hospital, dated 1952. It was built directly on top of St. Adelaide's Home for Invalid and Wayward Youth, a Catholic-run institution that had burned down in the 1930s. The print still bore faded burn marks on the edges. And more disturbingly, room 509 had once been part of a punishment wing. I stared at the outline on the page. Room 509 sat directly above what was once Chamber 9, a sealed concrete holding cell used to quarantine spiritual illness and children deemed possessed, defiant, or incurable. Eva flipped through another folder. "Look at this." It was a personnel record. A priest, Father Elias Noren, age 56, who was reported missing in 1934 after a containment ritual failed. The last note in his file, scrawled by hand in Latin, translated to, "He walks among the innocent now. He is not banished. He is waiting." Eva closed the file and looked at me, pale. Claire, what is happening upstairs? I don't think it ever stopped. By midnight, I had a plan. Stupid, reckless, desperate, but it was all I had. If this thing, the Hollow Man, fed off trauma, especially the pain of children, then maybe it could be lured. And maybe, just maybe, it could be trapped. I needed the west hallway clear. So I swapped badges with a tech and manually rerouted the 509 call bell to my pager only. Then I placed a patient name into the system, a false intake using my own information, but disguised as a 7-year-old trauma case. A new child for room 509. Me. I slipped into a pediatric gown, turned off my tracker, took a deep breath, and walked into room 509 alone at 2:17 a.m. The door clicked shut behind me. I had one weapon, a small vial of holy water Eva helped me procure from a nearby church. She didn't believe in ghosts, but something about this had rattled even her. She'd held it like it was radioactive. I placed the vial under the bed, where I could reach it quickly, and lay down on the thin mattress. The room was freezing. The monitors blinked even though I wasn't hooked to anything. The corner shadows pulsed slightly, like they were breathing. The air smelled faintly of wet stone and rot. And then, the camera light blinked red. Recording. At exactly 3 a.m., I heard the door click again, but it didn't open. Not like a physical opening. More like the sound of space being peeled. The room dimmed, as if something vast had stepped between me and the fluorescent light above. And then I heard it, the rasping breath, low, staggered, slithering. I didn't move. I kept my eyes on the ceiling and waited. The bed creaked. Weight settled on the edge. Cold flooded through the blanket. I forced myself to reach beneath the mattress and closed my fingers around the vial of holy water. My hand trembled. Then a whisper, his voice, right beside my ear. Why are you pretending to be one of them, Claire? The room distorted. The walls groaned. The heart monitor beeped wildly. Though I wasn't connected, the figure is there now, right above me, bent over, face inches from mine. He had no eyes, just darkness, swirling in sockets that seemed to stretch deeper than they should. His mouth was impossibly wide, and it smiled. You can't save them. You carry their pain. I've fed from you for years. I snapped the vial open and flung it directly into his face. The hiss that followed was indescribable. Not a scream, not an animal cry, more like a soul unraveling. The Hollow Man reared back, its form boiling, splitting at the seams. The walls of the room cracked. Black blood seeped from the corners of the ceiling, and the temperature dropped so violently that ice formed along the monitor wires. The lights exploded, and then he was gone. I gasped, heart pounding, still clutching the broken glass in my hand. The room was silent again, but it wasn't over. The wall behind the bed, formerly covered in white sterile paint, was now split open, revealing something hidden beneath, a door. Rusty, old, with a handle that hadn't been touched in decades. It wasn't part of the hospital floor plan, not on any map. I grabbed a flashlight from the emergency kit and opened it. A stone staircase led down. Cold air wafted from below, moist and ancient. I hesitated, but I knew I had to go. I climbed down. The passageway beneath 509 was tight, more like a forgotten tunnel than a proper hallway. It reeked of mold, old sweat, and something like sulfur. The steps ended in a round, vaulted room carved from stone. It looked older than the hospital, older than anything I'd ever seen. Symbols were etched along the walls, some religious, some not. At the center of the floor was a slab, like an altar, stained black with age. And carved into the wall above it were three words: offered, not taken. I don't know how long I stood there. Something had been imprisoned down here. Not a ghost, not a demon, even. A thing, a will, a hunger. And they'd been feeding it. Generations of children. They couldn't banish it, so they appeased it. 509 wasn't just haunted. It was a feeding trough. Suddenly, behind me, I heard movement. I turned, raising the flashlight, and there, standing at the top of the stairs, was Amelia. Her hospital gown was torn, her face pale, but she was alive. I ran to her. "Amelia, oh my God, you're okay." She didn't respond. She raised her hand and touched my face gently, then whispered, "He's still in me." And the lights in the chamber died. When I opened the hidden door beneath room 509, I thought I'd found the Hollow Man's prison. But when I saw Amelia, alive, and whispering that he was still inside her, I realized I was too late. This wasn't his lair. It was his womb. And now, something far worse is about to be born. The flashlight flickered. In a split second it went dark. I saw his silhouette behind Amelia, hunched, spindly, arms too long to be human. His eyes weren't eyes, they were tunnels, vacant, but pulsing with a presence I felt pressing against my skull like cold fingers under the skin. Then the light returned. Amelia was still in front of me, but her eyes weren't the same. The girl I remembered, the one who whispered from beneath hospital sheets, was gone. Her eyes were void black, like pits of tar stretching forever inward. Her hand still touched my face, gently, but now it trembled, as if straining to control something boiling beneath the surface. "Claire," she whispered. "He never left. He hid." Suddenly, she yanked her hand away and clutched her own chest, falling to her knees. Her small body convulsed, and a low guttural sound escaped her lips. Not a cry, not a scream. It was a laugh. Deep, wrong, ancient. I grabbed her shoulders, but the shadows in the chamber began moving. Not cast shadows, free shadows, like strips of animated darkness crawling across the walls. They slithered up her arms, her neck, her cheeks, like leeches seeking a host. "No, no, Amelia, fight it," I shouted. "You're stronger than him." Her mouth opened again, and this time a second voice came out, his voice layered beneath hers. "You opened the door, nurse. You broke the seal. Now I am born again." The altar behind us cracked loudly. A roar, like air being sucked through ancient stone, burst from the fissures in the walls. The symbols etched into the rock began glowing, one by one, like embers reigniting. Blood seeped through the stone, pooling at her feet. Amelia screamed. She arched backward, hands grasping at something invisible in the air, her entire body contorting like a marionette fighting its strings. I couldn't just watch. I couldn't let her become another victim. I tore the vial of blessed oil Eva had given me from my coat and poured it into my palm. I pressed my fingers to Amelia's forehead and whispered the only prayer I could remember. "Saint Michael Archangel, defend nos in proelio." Before I could finish, a shock wave of energy blasted from her chest. I flew backward, slammed into the stone wall, and hit the ground hard, my head spinning. When I looked back up, the Hollow Man was rising from her, emerging, peeling himself out of her like smoke pulled from fire. He was still attached by tendrils of shadow curling from her spine, but he now stood fully formed. No longer just a silhouette on camera, but flesh, or what passes for flesh in something not meant to exist. And then he did something that terrified me more than anything else he'd done. He turned toward the wall and bowed. From the wall's cracked center, something began pushing through. I don't know how to describe it except to say it was bigger, not in size, but in essence. A pressure so great it made my teeth ache. My skin began to crawl, and my thoughts grew loud, disjointed, like dozens of voices screaming over one another in my mind. And I understood. The Hollow Man was never the end. He was the herald. The shadows weren't invading. They were preparing. The ritual hadn't been completed yet, but I had opened the final door. I screamed and lunged toward Amelia, trying to sever the tendrils still linking her to the creature. But they moved, retreating back inside her, the Hollow Man now fading, like he was hiding inside her again. Amelia collapsed, her eyes rolling back. Then I heard the words, "One more child, and the veil will fall." I didn't remember climbing out of the chamber. I didn't remember sprinting through the sub-basement or emerging into the hall. I only remember when I burst back into the ER lobby, drenched in sweat and blood and shadows, and collapsed into Eva's arms. She'd been waiting. They didn't believe me, of course. I was placed on emergency leave. Delusional stress episode, they called it. No one could find Amelia. There was no record of her being readmitted. No new logs. No trace. Lily was gone too. Transferred, again, to an off-site evaluation center. The security footage? Wiped. 509. Locked. But I knew. They were preparing another child. The final one. And then the veil, the fragile boundary between what we know and what we fear, would rip open. And they'd come through. The Hollow Man was just the beginning. I needed help. Someone who wouldn't think I was insane. I drove straight to a local seminary school, the only one left with ties to the old sanitarium. There, I met Father Argento, a grim-faced exorcist with decades of scars and secrets in his eyes. I told him everything. I didn't care how I sounded. I showed him the folder, the photo prints, the hidden floor plans. At first, he sat in silence. Then he said, "You're not the first to come to me from that place." He pulled out a leather-bound book, its cover cracked with age. Inside were dozens of pages in Latin, drawings of rituals, markings I'd seen in the underground chamber. And there, etched in the center, was a sketch of the Hollow Man, bent, empty-eyed, and kneeling before something worse. A fragment, he said, a feeder. These entities require psychic trauma. That hospital, built over tortured souls, generations of suffering children, is a banquet. He closed the book with finality. But there is a way to banish it. I leaned in. Out. You must break the cycle. Deny it the offering. Cleanse the vessel. And seal the origin. I knew what that meant. I had to go back. To room 509. To the chamber. And to Amelia. Wherever she was. I returned to the hospital the next night. Off the books. Alone. Eva rerouted security logs. We blacked out hallway cameras and disabled the West Wing alarms. The hospital was nearly empty. I approached room 509. The door was open. Inside, sitting silently on the bed, was a boy, maybe 6 years old. Thin, pale, eyes glassy. He looked at me as I stepped in. "Are you the nurse?" I nodded slowly. Then his mouth moved, but the voice that came out was Amelia's. "Claire, it's me." I'm holding back, but not for long. I stumbled back. This was the final offering, the last child, and somehow, Amelia had found a way to possess the vessel to stop him. She was inside the cycle, trapped with the entity, and trying to delay its emergence. "I need you to come back with me," I whispered. "We can end this together." The boy twitched violently. His limbs cracked, like bones dislocating inside him. Black fluid trickled from his nose. The hollow man was breaking through. Amelia's voice screamed from within him. Now, Claire, before he breaks me. I grabbed him, scooped his frail body into my arms, and sprinted through the hall. No alarms, no lights, only shadows chasing me. Back in the underground chamber, the symbols on the wall reignited. The altar cracked again. I laid the boy, Amelia, onto the slab. I poured the blessed oil across the floor in a circle. I recited the prayer from Father Argento's book, and then I waited. The hollow man rose from the child like a shadow forced into the light. It screamed, not in pain, but in rage. The stone room trembled. Blood oozed from the cracks. But this time, I didn't flinch. You took too many, I whispered. You won't take this one. I poured the last of the oil on the altar, lit the match. Flames roared to life. The hollow man lunged, his hands inches from my throat. But Amelia's voice shouted from the child, "Seal it, Claire." I slammed the ceremonial seal onto the altar, a small iron sigil Father Argento had given me. The room exploded with light. The shadows screamed, and then everything went still. When I opened my eyes, the chamber was empty. The boy lay asleep, peaceful. The walls were clean, no symbols, no blood, just old stone and silence. The door behind me had closed, permanently. I carried the boy back upstairs, and when the morning shift arrived, I was already gone. Phoenix Children's Hospital has many dark secrets, but the thing hiding in plain sight wasn't just sinister, it was ancient. And now, once out, the storm outside had become biblical. Rain lashed at the windows like claws, and thunder shook the bones of the hospital. I stood frozen in the hallway, clutching the ancient book that Father Domingo had forced into my hands before vanishing beneath the floor tiles of the chapel. My hands trembled, not from the cold, but from the dawning realization that this wasn't just a haunting. It was a containment, and that containment was breaking. The children in the ward had all fallen into a deep, unnatural sleep. Monitors blinked rhythmically, displaying vitals that seemed off. Their heart rates were synchronized. Every single child, 63 beats per minute, like a metronome, like they were being controlled. I stared at the CCTV monitor in the nurse's station. Room 3C. The room where it had all started was now pitch black, the camera struggling to focus as static flickered in and out. But I saw something move. Not just the shadows, but something with shape, with limbs. It crawled across the ceiling like it had no concept of gravity. Long, skeletal fingers dragging across the tiles. Then it turned. I saw its face, but it wasn't a face. It was a mask of screaming mouths, dozens of them, all howling silently into the void. My vision blurred. I stumbled backward and knocked over a tray of syringes. That's when I heard the whispers again. Bring her to us. The nurse. She opens the gate. The book's pages fluttered, even though there was no wind. Symbols glowed faintly, red like old blood. I recognized some of them now. The same markings I had seen scrawled behind the wallpaper in the children's ward. The same ones that appeared under Adam's bed in chalk. It wasn't just a book. It was a key, and someone or something had been waiting for me to use it. I grabbed the intercom mic and paged the remaining night staff. All available personnel, secure the children's ward immediately. We have an active threat. Lock all exits. Silence. Then a voice crackled through the line. But it wasn't anyone I recognized. Natalie. The children are already gone. I turned. Angela was standing at the end of the hallway. Her eyes were completely white. Her smile looked painted on, stretched wide and unnatural. I took a step back. "You're not her." She laughed. A horrible, wet sound like gurgling through broken glass. Angela was weak. She let me in. "But you, Natalie, you've always been mine." The lights burst above her head one by one, each pop sending a shower of sparks to the floor. Darkness crept forward like a tide. I ran. The halls were warping. No matter how far I ran, I ended up back at room 3C. The door now stood wide open, and the floor inside was glowing. A deep, red pentagram pulsed beneath the bed. The mattress had dissolved into black mold, and tendrils of it writhed up the walls. Then I saw the children, all of them, standing in a circle around the room. Their eyes were shut. Their mouths moved in unison, chanting something in a language I didn't understand. The book began to hum in my hands. A shape rose from the center of the circle. The thing I had seen on the ceiling now stood before me, fully formed. It had grown since the last time, towering, emaciated, skin stretched tight across bones that jutted at impossible angles. And those mouths, God, those mouths, opened and screamed in layered, overlapping voices. It didn't need to touch me. Its presence alone pressed down on my chest like I was drowning. But then, I remember the final page of the book. Father Domingo had dog-eared it. A warning, a spell. I flipped to it. My eyes scanned the incantation, symbols dancing in my vision. This was it. I began to read aloud. My voice wavered at first, but then found strength. Et reliqua obscura, in tenebris manit, no light plus ambulare in lumen, claudite portam adernam. The creature shrieked. The children collapsed to the floor, unconscious but breathing. I kept reading. Vincula tua iterum ligenter, sanguinan tua, sed erum cativo caveret. Suddenly, Angela's voice, rasping and panicked, cut through the storm of sound. "No, you can't. You don't understand what you're unleashing." But I wasn't unleashing anything. I was locking it away. The book caught fire in my hands, yet I felt no heat. The flames were cold blue. The walls of room 3C began to collapse inward, folding like paper. The pentagram cracked and sucked downward like a whirlpool. And the creature, screaming, flailing, was dragged into the pit. The last thing I saw was its face unraveling into mist as the mouths fell silent. Then nothing. I woke up in the hospital chapel, surrounded by the children. They were groggy but awake, alive. Angela was gone. So was the book. And room 3C, it didn't exist anymore. Where it had been was just a wall, seamless, as if it had never been there at all. They ran the standard tests on me. Psych evaluations, sleep deprivation theories. Some chalked it up to mass hysteria. Others blamed carbon monoxide leaks, though nothing was ever found. Father Domingo never returned. The hospital was back to normal within a week. Children continued to recover. Parents smiled again. But deep down, I knew something had shifted. The air still felt watchful. And the security cameras? They were replaced. Glitches, they said. But one night, months later, I returned to the control room. Just for closure. I clicked through the archived footage of that night. Nothing but static. Except for one frame. Just one. It was me, standing in room 3C. Except I wasn't alone. Behind me was the creature, smiling with every mouth, and holding the burned remains of the book. The timestamp read, tomorrow, 3:33 a.m. I don't work at Phoenix Children's anymore. I left without a trace. Burned every copy of that footage. Changed my name. But something tells me it isn't over. Every night at 3:33 a.m., I wake up without reason. And in the corner of my room, just past the reach of the light, there's always a shape. Watching, waiting, and one day, I know it will step forward and remind me of the words. The nurse opens the gate. The end.